Welcome to the Dingir-Zone. Hi, I'm Victor, and today I want to talk a little bit about Kent Hovind, also known as inmate 06452-017. Frankly, there isn't much left to be said about Hovind because this video here, The Weakness of Kent Hovind, has basically said everything there is to be said about him. But there's actually one point left that I want to add here. And about that, the first thing that I ever saw about Kent Hovind was this video here, this discussion between Kent Hovind and Professor Dave regarding evolution. Okay, and Mr. Kent Hovind thinks that evolution isn't real. Okay. And yeah, if evolution isn't real, then it's quite surprising how many species there are on the planet, right? And Kent Hovind thinks that Noah's Ark was real, for example. So how can there be so many species if all the animals were extinct only something like 4,000 years ago, right? How can there be so much diversity if only a few animals have been on that boat? I mean, there wouldn't have been two of every kind if we have several million species, right? Just a boat, as it's described in Genesis, would have been too small to carry all these animals, right? And Kent Hovind argues that you don't need to have two of every species. You only need to have two of every kind, right? And then all the other animals, all the other species would come from these kinds, right? So you wouldn't need dogs, for example, because, you would have wolves, and then dogs could come from wolves, and all the different races of dogs would come from that, okay? And I find it a bit funny that Hovind uses evolution in an argument where he tries to disprove evolution, right? So, he found this this way around this problem by saying, well, there is microevolution but no macroevolution. So dogs can turn into dogs of other races, but not into cats, for example, because that's a completely different kind. Okay. Now, in this discussion, and this really upset me and upset everyone, Hovind really refused to define what he means by the word kind. Okay. He pretends to be a scientist, but refusing to define your terms is not really what scientists do. Okay, so let's look into this question. What are these kinds? Okay, to answer that question, remember that in 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and freed the Jews from the Babylonian exile. And Cyrus the Great, that was the Persian Empire. The Persians were Zoroastrians. And there has been cultural exchange between the Jews and the Persians. For example, the whole idea of heaven and hell comes from Zoroastrianism. Judaism didn't have that before. The idea of a messiah, which is called Saoshyant in Zoroastrianism. The end of the world with a final battle between good and evil, that's coming from Zoroastrianism. The soul, angels, demons, that's all coming from Zoroastrianism. And so there was cultural exchange between Jews and Persians, but did this also affect the story of Noah's Ark? Well, in Babylon there was the story, the Gilgamesh epic, which on tablet 11 has a story of a guy called Ziusudra who survives a worldwide flood by building an ark and taking animals with him. And that's an older story than Noah's Ark, by the way. So I will make a video about that and look into the similarities between these stories in detail very soon. But one very notable difference is that in the Gilgamesh epic, it never says that Ziusudra took 2 of each kind. It just says something like he took the animals on board. Okay, and yeah, the Zoroastrian literature has this story here, Fargad II, Yima, Yamshet and the Deluge, which is a story about King Yima, who survives a hard winter by sealing himself in a cave together with 2 animals of each kind. Huh, that's interesting. So this is one detail in Noah's Ark that's not in the Gilgamesh epic, but here in Zoroastrianism we find that exact detail. Okay, so I argue that Zoroastrianism did influence Noah's Ark, right? By the way, the animals that King Yima takes with him are described very much the way I think in Leviticus it says which animals you are allowed to sacrifice to God. Just a side note. Now, can this Zoroastrian literature tell us anything about these kinds of animals? Yes. Here in this story, Fravadin Yasht, Hymn to the Guardian Angels, in line 43, it speaks about 5 kinds of animals. Okay? And in line 44, it again speaks about 5 kinds of animals. Now, what are these kinds? Well, in line 74, a bit further down, it clarifies what these 5 kinds are. We worship the souls of the tame animals, the wild animals. Okay, and here it lists them. The animals that live in the waters, those of the animals that live under the ground, those of the flying ones, those of the running ones, those of the grazing ones. So here we have a list of these 5 kinds of animals, right? We have swimming, crawling, flying, running and grazing animals. That's 5. Okay? Now if we compare that to Genesis 7, line 21 to 23, all flesh died that moves upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle. That's grazing animals. Beast, I would say these are running animals. Every creeping thing that creepers upon the earth, insects. And down here it also mentions fowl of the heaven, that's flying animals, birds basically. And in line 22 it says, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. So this explicitly excludes the 5th kind of animal, the swimming animals. Okay, so here we have a list that completely coincides with these 5 kinds from Zoroastrianism, right? We have swimming animals, crawling animals, flying animals, running and grazing animals. So yeah, I think this really answers the question what these kinds are, right? And yeah, this is a super broad definition, right? It says that pretty much everything can evolve into pretty much everything else, right? And that is something that Hovind is trying to disprove. So using this definition, he's not doing himself any favors. And finally, I want to say, I think a narcissist like Kent Hovind is gonna have alerts for his own name on all social medias. Okay, so I'm assuming he's gonna watch this. Hello, Mr. Hovind. While I have your attention, Duh, you think your grandpa is a rock, you think your grandpa is a rock, you think your grandpa is a rock. I find it somewhat strange that you think that this is gonna strengthen your position, while at the same time you are trying to convince us that your grandpa is dirt and your grandmother is a rib. So, yeah, whatever. That's all I wanted to talk about today. If you like this video, like it, share it, subscribe, and see you next time.